public sphere. Hi, this is Rabbi Joseph Kolakowski. I want to spend I want to spend a few minutes talking about this controversy that came up just recently in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the city council meeting. So, Baruch Maboim, welcome everyone. If you're new to the channel, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting. It really helps the algorithm. If you're watching this video either in the live stream or later on the recording. I did try to record the video actually several times this morning on my way to work, and I was unable to get it to work. So that's why I'm trying to live stream. Hopefully this works. So anyway, there was a controversy recently, I guess it was a little over a week ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that there was the opening prayer of the city council was a pagan priestess. Her name is Amy McAdams, I believe, and she was invited by, again, I think the name was Chris. Try to make again a screen recording to discuss this, but you heard about the story?
Yes, we put out the video.
Okay. So, and you remember the names from this morning? So anyway, this priestess McAdams, she was talking about as a symbol of feminism and overcoming oppression, and that was the implication that she made in the city council, and a lot of people were offended by it. Now there are many different reactions that are coming out of this. Now, for those who don't know me, I tend to be more on the American right, which I consider to be champions of liberty. And so even though as a religious Jew, I oppose personally paganism as a matter of my religion, but as an American, I believe very strongly that religious liberty and freedom are paramount to what makes this country great. Now, but I believe, and I've advocated very strongly that it works both ways. Meaning, I remember years ago, I was a rabbi in Richmond, Virginia, and we were, as a rabbi of a synagogue, I was on the board of the local Jewish Federation, and most of the rabbis didn't bother usually to show up to the meetings, but I lived right next door to the JCC. The building was in the same, their offices were in the same building, so I would attend the meetings. And often they would say, as representatives of the Jewish community there in Richmond, which was mostly not Orthodox and therefore mostly more on the left, that they were considering a government law, and they were advocating for this law that there should be, if any chaplains are doing a non-denominational prayer, that the prayers should be non-denominational. Meaning, if they're presenting a prayer as an opening invocation, like at a city council meeting or something along, or a state meeting or some other similar type of thing, then, for example, there would be an invocation of the name of Jesus by a Christian chaplain. And that was pretty much the main thing that they were focused on. And I spoke up and I said, well, if you're going to tell a Christian not to invoke Jesus, then, or you're going to tell the Jews, us, not to pray in Hebrew or to quote something that's not, maybe part of another tradition. You're going to tell us not to invoke Allah or quote from Muhammad, etc. And my feeling was, if you take away the liberty from the majority, it also hurts we in the minority. And so for that reason, it's best to allow everybody to express themselves as they wish, according to their own religion. Apparently, my understanding is that there was a similar issue that was brought up there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So Oklahoma, every county in Oklahoma voted for President Trump. And it's quite interesting that, of course, Tulsa is the biggest city in Oklahoma. And so you had this one council member who was pagan, I assume Wiccan, and she invited her priestess to come and give the invocation. And so the discussion was, afterwards, a lot of people were offended by this, and the discussion was, well, will we allowed to invoke a prayer in the name of Jesus? So then the same thing would be that a pagan would not be invoking any particular deities. And so if you would invite a pagan to be a guest chaplain at an event like this, and to give the opening prayer, it would be just a general thing, I would assume, knowing pagans personally, working with them as a chaplain in the prison system. So I have a pagan chaplain who works for me that I supervise. He wouldn't be invoking Thor or Odin. Else he would be just invoking the divine. If it's a safe space for everyone to invoke their own deity, then it would be allowed. So, for example, last week in the prison we had an interfaith Thanksgiving service, and most of the chaplains who were there were Christian. There was one Catholic, one Orthodox Christian, and one Protestant Episcopalian, and then there was a Native American chaplain, and there was myself, who was Jewish. And we each gave a message according to our own tradition, and we did not water it down. We were not required to water it down. Everyone could pray as they saw fit, and everyone could offer a message as they saw fit. And so there was no, I recall a year ago the Eastern Orthodox priest had asked permission, is it okay for me to pray, in the name, of how they pray, in the name of their Trinity and so forth. And I said, of course, this is a place where, even though we're of different faiths, we each are going to express ourselves in accordance with our own tradition if we so choose to do so. So I'd be curious that if in the Tulsa City Hall, when they have the opening prayers, do they tell Christian chaplains not to invoke the name of Jesus? If they do that, which I don't think is appropriate for them to tell them not to, because a Christian should be able to pray in accordance with tradition. Nonetheless, so then there would be nothing wrong with this legally, with the pagan priestess invoking Medusa or whatever else. However, if a Christian has to give a general prayer, those of us who are in the minority should not ever be terrorizing the majority, which I think in general, this is, one of the big problems that we have in general with prayer in public places, and there are those who are trying to remove religion altogether. And I saw the Freedom from Religion Society, whatever they're called. They were saying, well, after this controversy with the Pagan, so they just should stop having opening prayers altogether at a really they want at any city council meeting. I don't think that's really appropriate. I think if we have this tradition going back really centuries in this country of opening different things in prayer, opening city council meetings and Congress and so forth. And if there's a certain decorum that's expected, so we respect that. But if there's not, then there's nothing, a different religion. But there's no offense taken with this, Now, then there was a discussion. I think the governor of Oklahoma said that it was a satanic ritual. And then the pagan priestess answered back, well, it's not satanic because they're not Satanists. Now, from some fundamental Christian point of view, anything that's not Christian, certain fundamentalist Christians would say is demonic. They would say my religion is demonic, because I follow, I follow Judaism, and particularly the issues they have, mostly based on lies and propaganda, are about our post-biblical literature, like the Talmud and the Midrash, the Zohar, and so forth. So, and so the same thing, even though, and they would probably say the same about Islam. The truth of the matter is that the Abrahamic religions essentially share the same God, but there's different aspects of the theology, and so Jews and Muslims would have a theology that's more similar. Christians have their ideas that are less similar. And some of these fundamentalist Christians actually believe that the early Jewish people were all Trinitarian. This is actually a belief among certain fundamentalist Christians. I saw a post on Twitter asking why was Naomi trying to convince Ruth not to convert to Christianity? And we were like, wait a second, Christianity, it didn't come about for another, many centuries later. And this person was trying to claim that no, that's that all the people in the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, were Trinitarian. And then it's only later that the rabbis changed it to pure monotheism. Really crazy types of ideas, but they have the right to believe crazy and stupid ideas like that, just like pagans have the right to believe their own crazy and stupid ideas. Everybody has a right to believe what they want here in America, and since there's no religious test and so forth, there should be room for all of these different things. I recall the same thing during the RNC. There was a big controversy because a Sikh woman came and she invoked Wahaguru, which to be translated from Punjabi would be the same as Eloyoet's wondrous counselor, of which Christians would say that that's a reference to the Godhead, wondrous counselor. And so therefore you have all of these different things. And again, they were saying, oh, this is demonic and so forth. And then again, you'll hear some, I know one fundamentalist preacher who I enjoy listening to. He said, well, if Satan was going to invent a religion, wouldn't be someone, like Anton Levin with their LaVeyan Satanism or something. Would be the Mormons, that they look like the real deal. They're very ethical and moral and pious and chaste, and yet their theology is different than the little O Orthodox Christian theology, as well as the big O Orthodox Christian theology. And so therefore, that is what they would see as satanic. So if someone believes all of the, they would say the same thing about the Mormon and the Jehovah's Witnesses, and Muslims and Jews and Sikhs, who are all monotheists, maybe not the Mormons, but others that they're monotheists, and then, well, this is how they're teaching it, meaning that it's all excuse me, that everything is demonic. It's not exactly their way, and they'll say the same thing. The Catholics, they say, they'll say the Pope is Antichrist and all this. So then it's not that strange for them to say this, even though, again, a Wiccan doesn't believe that they're worshiping Satan. Satan is not part of their pantheon. Generally, again, either invoking a vague god and goddess figure, or some sort of ancient polytheism, and so certain pagans will embrace Greco-Roman paganism or Norse paganism and so forth, and work with those different deities in their mythologies. Now there's one more point, and I want to apologize that I'm not really that well spoken right now. Sometimes I usually try to speak a little better. Maybe today it's already the end of the day, so I'm a little bit tired. Didn't really think this out before I started making the video, to be honest. But in any event, the other point that was being brought up in this video, in this story, and from, I think, the councilwoman who invited the pagan priestess, was the issue, what they call Christian nationalism, which I've addressed elsewhere on this channel. The idea of Christian nationalism is more of a left-wing idea than a right-wing idea, because if where do you see Christian nationalism? Well, you see it in Europe, where people aren't really that religious, but they have these established churches. And America was specifically never supposed to have an established church, so it's a very different type of an approach. And it's really the American right that, again, embraces this type of radical liberty where you don't have all these different, the churches that are established in the government. And so that's why we have diversity. And also, I always say, because we have a spiritual free market, we offer better goods and services in our religions, and that's why, in general, Americans are more of a religious people than other countries. And it's because of the spiritual free market, just like the financial free market leads to better goods and services, as opposed to in Europe, where pretty much all the religions are run by the government in most of the European countries, and there's a lot of corruption and mediocrity in European religion because of that. And that is really what you would call really Christian nationalism. I was sitting at a meeting, interfaith meeting, and I'm probably one of the more conservative people there, and they were talking about the scourge of Christian nationalism, and then there was a conservative, big C conservative rabbi, which they tend to be more left-wing politically in the conservative movement, but was talking something about Israel, and I finally, after years, I finally spoke up. I said, I don't understand. You speak against Christian nationalism, but this is Jewish nationalism. If Jewish nationalism is okay, then Christian nationalism is okay. You can't have it both ways. And I personally as an American, I don't have as much of a problem with what most people are accusing of being Christian nationalism, which for the most part isn't in that sense. There's no move on the right of establishment of religion, as opposed to really on the left. There is a movement of establishment of religion, that if you don't fit into their left-wing bubble, you're canceled and so forth, and often in the religious sphere as well, it's like that. In any event, I do want to address this issue that's brought up, because probably one of the biggest controversies right now is that in Oklahoma they introduced the Bible curriculum to the public school system. And I know there was a lot of controversy and pushback on it, but that Bible curriculum is not Christian nationalism. A Bible curriculum means that it's recognition that the Bible is an influential part of American history and literature. Just like growing up, going to public school, I remember we learned about Greek mythology and so forth, and we learned Shakespeare. The Bible is just as important, if not more important, to American society as these things are. And so, yes, we knew, this woman was invoking Medusa. We knew about Medusa. We learned Medusa in school, but we didn't learn very much, except a little bit in history class, social studies class, a little bit about different religions. And yet, the truth of the matter is, there's so much in society that you would not understand without some basic biblical literacy. I was reflecting on that this morning. I was playing some music as I was driving, and it was Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan has his, back and forth with different religions, between his own Jewish roots and interest in Christianity and interest in other religions as well. And then the Byrds also. And you listen to their music, and there is so much, and not to mention, I was also listening to Johnny Cash this morning. Johnny Cash was a minister. But the point is that these aspects of the popular culture, it would be impossible to understand what Bob Dylan is talking about, Pharaoh's tribe and Goliath and so forth, unless you know the Bible. Even if you don't believe in it, it's just part of the culture. And there's so many people that say, well, no, it's not. But it is, And so that's why I believe that biblical literacy is important. This same Episcopal priest told me, he's an adjunct professor at a university, which happens to be a Jesuit-run university. And this priest, this Episcopal priest, he says he's teaching a course in Introduction to the Bible. And he's asking the college students, most of them have no idea of basic ideas of the Bible, even those who profess to be very fundamentalist Christians. When he asks them, how many of you know the story of Noah's Ark? How many of you know the story of Jonah? How many of you know David and Goliath? And they don't know. They don't know. These are college kids. I remember I myself, you can find the video online, I was a guest speaker at also a Catholic university, at Mount St. Mary here at Newburgh. And I was teaching about Hasidic Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, as a guest speaker in a course on world religions. And the professor, was a nun, said to me, these kids, they're not understanding what you're saying. And I wasn't speaking in Yiddish or Hebrew or Aramaic. I was using words that any good Christian should know. and speaking in a clear English in that way. And she told me, she said, "Oh, what is that one? Is that a cat or no? That's a cat. I thought it was a weasel or something." So she said to me, "These college kids, you should consider them be on the level of catechism." I said, "This is college. I don't understand. All my life as a kid growing up, I was told to look at college like it's, and the college kids, they don't know anything, and certainly not about religion, the Bible, things like that. Very, very interesting world that we live in, and it's very sad." And I was sitting with the Orthodox Archbishop recently and discussing the same issue. It's like I brought up what this Episcopal priest said, that there's such a lack of biblical literacy in the world today, and it's something that we have to address. But again, I don't think that that's a violation either. And so to me, as someone coming from the more, I would say, the right-wing libertarian type of approach, and I've said this before, I think it was a video that I made a number of years ago where I discussed, there was a controversy in the public school about Muslim prayer by students in public school during Ramadan, if it should be allowed or not. And I said, of course it should be allowed, but Christians should look at that as an opportunity and not as an attack. Because if the Muslim kids can have prayer groups, then for darn sure Christian kids should be able to have it as well. And I think there should be also a certain level of we would call like kinasofrim, the jealousy of scribes, meaning if you as a Christian or a Jew see Muslims who are so pious, keeping with their religion and their liturgy and their fasting, and if you're Jewish, maybe you'll look into, Jews pray 3 times a day and Jews fast at different times. We're not that different, and maybe if I'm not so religious, maybe I'll be inspired by them, by the Muslims who are pious in their religion, to be more pious in my own religion. The same thing with the Christians. That if they're seeing this is what my schoolmates are doing as far as this is concerned, so then the same thing, a Christian would be a more pious Christian and start reading the Bible more and start praying more and maybe start a prayer club, so forth, and and then again, maybe things will change and we will have more prayer in public school, but with that diversity, that the Hindus can do their Hindu prayers and the Muslims can do their Muslim prayers, and the pagans can do their pagan prayers, etc. For there's one group that's been very vocal about these types of things in the Satanic Temple, and I believe that a lot of their goal has been to say, well, if you don't let us have our clubs in the school, so then the others, the Christians, will have to have their clubs shut down. And I think it was on the 700 Club, they were saying, so if they want to come to your school, the 700 Club said, really right-wing, born-again Christians, said, just let them do it, and just hope and pray that nobody joins. But if you try to stop them, all that's going to come out of that is they're going to try to stop you from having your groups. And so that's why, it's like that. And I remember, so in the prison, again, we had 1 or 2 guys who said they were Satanists. And then, so I reached out to someone from the Satanic Temple. At first, it was very hard to get a hold of them. And then they were like gobsmacked, dumbfounded. You actually want us to help you? We have a job to protect the religious freedom of all these different religious communities. And so if an inmate wants to hear from you, give us some stuff that we can share with them. We're looking for some material or something, because the Levay and the Church of Satan, they say they only work with law-abiding citizens, so they don't have a prison ministry. So, you guys, you're always trying to get into the public schools and this and that. Here we have a government organization that's asking for your help. Well, I don't know. So then that shows that you're not really serious about this, and you to shut down the other people. And so that's really, I think, what it comes down to. And I think really the next step with all these things, which has been coming about, and again, from a more libertarian point of view, I think this is the right way to approach it, is that there should be, and there are in many places, atheist chaplains, because that demonstration shows that atheism is a religion. And when they try to claim that it's not a religion, they say, no, look, you have chaplains. There are even some atheist churches. There's the Society for Ethical Culture and other groups like that are essentially atheist churches. Hi, how are you? And so when we start to show that these churches that atheism is just another religion, so then that goes to say that essentially, that they can't have the hegemony of saying that they're not a religion, and that they can try to impose their little orthodoxy on the rest of us. And so that's also part of the idea. Okay. Well, I see your question, young Philly, about the Shemitah. I'd rather keep this video to be on the subject what we're discussing here, but I think I have covered everything. But it looks like you're the only one here, because it says there's only one person watching. So I would follow again, like how Rabbi Victor Miller, he would first say, is there any questions on the subject at hand, and which it seems there are not, and then questions on any subject of which you have one. So very quickly, so in the book of Leviticus, it says that the 7th year is the sabbatical year, which is the year of release, which is the translation of the Hebrew word Shemitah, the Shemot. And so there's two major aspects, I guess three major aspects of the Shemitah. One is that the land becomes ownerless and fallow, and so therefore all produce that's grown in the Holy Land is free for the taking. The next thing is that slaves go free, the indentured servants go free, unless they choose to stay until the Jubilee year, the 50th year. And then, which I believe applies all over the world, anyone who has indentured, although I don't know if the din of the Eved Ivri exists outside of Eretz Israel. And then finally, which does apply all over the world, is the forgiveness of all debts. And so that's basically what it's about. According to the Jewish tradition, these laws only are enforced from a biblical standpoint when the majority of the Israelites are dwelling in the Holy Land. And so what that we observe it today is a rabbinical decree only to remember it, and that's why there are certain leniencies that you can switch a public debt to a private debt to a public debt, and then it doesn't have to be forgiven, things like that. Next question, can a Cohen marry another Cohen? Cohen means a man. So in Jewish law, two men cannot be married in the Torah law. Are you asking if a Cohen could marry a Bas Cohen? Yes. Meaning, can a priest marry the daughter of a priest? Yes. Doesn't have to, but he could. And some people even suggest that it might be there might be some preference of that, it really isn't. It really doesn't matter. But there's been some suggestions like that. All right. Anything else anybody wanted for the good of the order before we conclude this live stream? Appreciate everyone for bearing with me. I'm a little distracted, whatever. In Judaism, can you marry your cousin? Yes. That's maybe not recommended, but you can, and in certain rabbinical dynasties, it's actually quite common for cousins to marry. You know, a lot of times when the rabbi's children get married, the girl's not changing her name because they had the same name. People remember Rebbetzin Jungreis of blessed memory. Jungreis was both her maiden name and her married name because she married her cousin, and by Torah law, there's nothing wrong marrying a first cousin. Obviously, if you live in an area where that's illegal, I think many states in the United States that would be illegal. So therefore, you have to follow the law of the land where you are at. But not only can you marry a first cousin, an uncle could marry a niece. That's one of those, and yet we see that Amram married his aunt Yocheved, Jochebed, and they're cousins. But by the Torah law, that is permitted. An uncle can marry a niece, yes. An uncle can marry a niece, and they even say that it's considered like a special type of mitzvah for an uncle to marry a niece. But again, it's not so common. It's not. Yeah. So. No, it's not incest. Incest is marrying, a parent or a sister, or incest. But as far as cousins, nieces, and nephews, it's in the Bible. But an aunt cannot marry a nephew. That would be incest. That's all it comes down to. Not something I would recommend, just because.
So she was like crying because.
All right, I'm not sure what happened to this live stream, but thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment. Sorry to get into controversial issues. See you later.